Dr. Sarah Chen had 26 years of surgical experience, and nothing could surprise her anymore. Until she saw that patient. The scalpel fell from her hand as she turned to the nurses. "I know this man. He's my..." The operating room froze instantly, because the doctor had no idea that the words she just spoke would turn the entire hospital upside down. It was exactly 2:47 a.m. Seattle General Hospital's emergency room hummed with its usual controlled chaos. Ambulance sirens wailed in the distance, fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, and the smell of antiseptic hung thick in the air like an invisible fog. Dr. Sarah Chen stood at the sink in OR 7, methodically scrubbing her hands for what felt like the 1,000th time that year. At 52, she had the steady hands of a master craftsman and the tired eyes of someone who'd seen too much. 26 years of cutting, stitching, and saving lives had carved deep lines around her eyes, but they'd also given her something invaluable: the ability to stay calm when everyone else panicked. Tonight was supposed to be routine. A motorcycle accident victim, critical but stable. Internal bleeding, possible organ damage. The kind of case she could handle in her sleep. The patient had been rushed in 40 minutes earlier, unconscious, no ID, just a man in his 50s wearing a leather jacket and jeans. The paramedics found him 3 miles outside the city limits, his bike wrapped around a tree, rain washing away any evidence of how it happened. Dr. Chen called Nurse Martinez from the hallway, patients prepped and ready. Sarah dried her hands slowly, deliberately. She'd learned long ago that rushing led to mistakes, and mistakes in her profession meant death. She pulled on her surgical gloves with practiced precision, each finger sliding into place like pieces of a well-rehearsed symphony. The operating room was bright, sterile, perfect. Her team was already in position. Dr. Harrison, the anesthesiologist, monitoring vitals. Nurse Rodriguez, organizing instruments with military precision, and 2 residents whose names she hadn't bothered to learn yet. Sarah approached the table, her eyes focused on the monitors first. Blood pressure stable, heart rate elevated, but not dangerously so. Good signs. Then she looked down at the patient. Time stopped. The scalpel, which she had just picked up, slipped from her fingers and clattered onto the sterile floor. The sound echoed through the OR like a gunshot. Every head in the room turned toward her. Dr. Harrison looked up from his monitors, concern creasing his brow. "Sarah? What's wrong?" But Sarah couldn't speak. She was staring at the man's face, her own face draining of all color beneath her surgical mask. Her hands began to tremble, something that hadn't happened since her residency 25 years ago. The face on the table was older, scarred, weathered by time and hardship. But she knew it. She'd seen it in nightmares for 16 years. She'd seen it in police sketches, in newspaper photos, in her own drawings during therapy sessions. Marcus Torres, the man who killed her father. Sarah's voice cracked. She cleared her throat and tried again, but the words came out as a whisper. "I know this man." Nurse Rodriguez stepped closer. "Doctor, do you need a moment?" Sarah's mind raced backward, 16 years into the past. Her father, Dr. David Chen, walking out of his clinic after a long day of treating patients who couldn't afford to go anywhere else. It was 9 p.m. on a Tuesday. Sarah was in her 2nd year of residency at the time, living across town, unaware that her father's life was about to end in a parking lot over $47. Marcus Torres had been desperate that night, strung out, broke, and looking for easy money. He'd chosen the wrong target. Dr. David Chen didn't carry cash, didn't wear expensive jewelry, didn't drive a fancy car. He was just a good man trying to help people. The confrontation lasted less than 3 minutes. Marcus demanded money. David calmly explained he didn't have any. Marcus pulled a knife. David tried to reason with him. Marcus panicked and struck once, a single thrust to the abdomen that pierced David's portal vein. David bled out in that parking lot, while Marcus fled into the night with nothing but a wallet containing $7 and a picture of Sarah from her medical school graduation. The case went cold within 6 months. Marcus Torres disappeared like smoke, and Sarah was left with a hole in her chest that no amount of surgery could repair. Now, 16 years later, he was lying unconscious on her table, bleeding internally, completely at her mercy. "Dr. Chen? Dr. A." Harrison's voice seemed to come from very far away. "Should I call another surgeon?" Sarah blinked, focusing on the present moment. The monitors showed Marcus's blood pressure dropping. Time was running out. She looked around the OR. Her team was waiting, watching her with growing concern. They had no idea what was happening, no understanding of the storm raging inside her mind. She could walk away. She could claim a conflict of interest, let Dr. Williams take over, and watch from the observation deck as the man who destroyed her family either lived or died by someone else's hands. Or she could stay. Sarah's hands slowly stopped trembling. She bent down, picked up the fallen scalpel, and dropped it into the disposal bin. "Nurse Rodriguez, I need a new scalpel." "Doctor," Dr. Harrison said carefully, "if you know this patient personally, perhaps—" "I know him," Sarah interrupted, her voice now steady as stone. "But I'm still his surgeon tonight." She looked down at Marcus Torres, this broken man who had broken her family. His breathing was shallow, his skin pale from blood loss. In this moment, he wasn't a killer. He was just another patient who would die without her help. "His name is Marcus Torres," she said quietly. 51 years old. He's wanted for murder in the first degree. The victim was Dr. David Chen, killed 16 years ago during a robbery attempt. The OR fell silent except for the steady beeping of monitors. "Dr. David Chen was my father." Nurse Rodriguez gasped. Dr. Harrison looked like he'd been struck by lightning. The residents exchanged glances, unsure whether they were witnessing a breakdown or something else entirely. Sarah held out her hand. "Scalpel." "Dr. Chen," Dr. Harrison said softly, "you can't operate on him. It's a conflict of—" "He's bleeding to death," Sarah cut him off. "Every second we waste talking is another second closer to losing him. I didn't spend 26 years learning to save lives just to let someone die on my table because of who he used to be." She paused, her eyes never leaving Marcus's face. "My father took an oath to help people, no matter who they were or what they'd done. He died trying to live by that oath. I won't dishonor his memory by abandoning mine." Nurse Rodriguez slowly placed a new scalpel in Sarah's outstretched palm. "Doctor," she whispered, "are you sure?" Sarah's grip tightened around the instrument. For a moment, the weight of it felt like the weight of the entire world. Then she nodded. "Let's save his life." The next 3 hours were the longest of Sarah's career. Every cut she made, every stitch she placed, every decision she made carried the weight of 16 years of grief, anger, and unresolved pain. Marcus had severe internal bleeding from multiple organs. His spleen was ruptured, his liver lacerated, and there was significant damage to his small intestine. It was the kind of complex trauma that required absolute precision and unwavering focus. Sarah gave him both. She worked in complete silence, her hands moving with the confidence of a master craftsman. Her team watched in awe as she repaired damage that should have been fatal, her technique flawless, despite the emotional storm they all knew was raging inside her. At 6:23 a.m., as the first light of dawn crept through the hospital windows, Sarah placed the final suture. Marcus Torres would live. She stepped back from the table, pulled off her gloves, and walked out of the OR without a word. Dr. Harrison found her 20 minutes later in the break room, sitting alone with a cup of coffee that had gone cold in her hands. "That was incredible work in there," he said, taking the chair across from her. "I've never seen anything like it." Sarah didn't respond immediately. She stared into her coffee cup like it contained the answers to questions she'd been asking for 16 years. "I kept waiting for my hands to shake," she finally said. "I kept waiting for the anger to take over, for the grief to paralyze me, but it never came. All I could think about was what my father would have done." "And what would he have done?" Sarah's lips curved into the faintest hint of a smile. "Exactly what I did. Save the patient, ask questions later." Dr. Harrison leaned forward. "Sarah, you know we have to report this. Hospital administration, the police." "I already called them," she interrupted. "Detective Morrison is on his way. Marcus will be under police guard the moment he wakes up." She set down her coffee cup and looked directly at her colleague. "I need you to understand something, David. What happened in there wasn't about forgiveness. It wasn't about letting go of the past or finding closure. It was about being a doctor. It was about honoring an oath that's bigger than my personal feelings." 2 days later, Marcus Torres woke up in the ICU with a police officer sitting beside his bed and Dr. Sarah Chen standing at the foot of it. His eyes were cloudy from medication, but they sharpened when he saw her face. Something flickered there. Recognition, maybe even memory. "Do you know who I am?" Sarah asked quietly. Marcus tried to speak but couldn't. His throat was raw from the breathing tube. He managed a slight nod. Sarah moved closer to his bed. "My name is Dr. Sarah Chen. 16 years ago, you killed my father, Dr. David Chen, outside his clinic on Morrison Street." Marcus's eyes filled with tears. He tried to turn away, but Sarah stepped into his line of sight. "Look at me," she said firmly. "You're going to spend the rest of your life in prison for what you did. But before that happens, I want you to know something." She leaned closer, her voice dropping to just above a whisper. "I could have let you die on that table. No one would have questioned it. Complications happen, patients are lost, but I didn't. Do you know why?" Marcus shook his head weakly. "Because my father taught me that a doctor's duty isn't to judge who deserves to live or die. Our job is to heal, regardless of who's lying on our table. You took my father away from me, but you couldn't take away what he taught me." Sarah straightened up, her voice growing stronger. "You're alive today because David Chen raised me to be better than my worst impulses. You're alive because he taught me that mercy isn't earned, it's given freely, even to those who don't deserve it." She turned to leave, then paused at the door. "When you go to trial, when you face the judge and jury, I want you to remember this moment. I want you to remember that the daughter of the man you killed chose to save your life. And I want you to think about what kind of man David Chen must have been to raise a daughter who could make that choice." The door closed softly behind her, leaving Marcus Torres alone with his thoughts, his crimes, and a second chance he never expected to receive. The news of what happened spread through the hospital like wildfire. By the end of the week, every staff member knew the story. Some called Sarah a hero, others questioned her judgment. A few suggested she should have recused herself from the case entirely. But Dr. Harrison, who had witnessed the entire operation, saw something different. He saw a woman who had stared into the face of her deepest pain and chosen to heal rather than harm. "I've been practicing medicine for 30 years, he told the hospital board during their emergency meeting, "and I've never seen anything like what Dr. Chen did in that OR. She didn't just save a patient's life, she saved her own soul." The hospital administration was less philosophical. They were concerned about liability, about public perception, about the precedent Sarah's actions might set. They ordered a full investigation and temporarily suspended her pending review. Sarah didn't fight the suspension. She cleaned out her office, said goodbye to her colleagues, and went home to the small apartment she'd lived in since her residency. For the first time in 26 years, she had nowhere to be at 6 a.m. She spent her days walking through the city, visiting places she hadn't seen in years. She went to her father's grave for the first time since the funeral, bringing fresh flowers and sitting in the grass for hours, telling him about what she'd done. "I hope I made the right choice, Dad," she whispered to the headstone. "I hope you would have been proud." The wind rustled through the trees, and for just a moment, Sarah could swear she heard her father's voice. "You did exactly what I taught you to do, sweetheart. You chose to be a healer." 2 weeks into her suspension, Sarah received an unexpected visitor. Detective Morrison stood at her door, hat in hand, looking uncomfortable. "Dr. Chen," he said, "I need to ask you some questions about the night you operated on Marcus Torres." Sarah invited him in, made coffee, and sat across from him at her small kitchen table. "I need to understand," Morrison said, stirring sugar into his cup, "why you didn't call us immediately when you recognized him." Sarah considered the question carefully. "Because he was dying," she said simply. "Because in that moment, he wasn't a criminal or my father's killer. He was a patient who needed surgery, and I was the only surgeon available to save him." Morrison leaned back in his chair. "I've been a cop for 22 years, Dr. Chen. I've seen people do terrible things in the name of justice, but I've never seen anyone do what you did." He pulled a folder from his briefcase and set it on the table. "Marcus Torres has been wanted for your father's murder for 16 years, but he's also been wanted for 3 other crimes: a convenience store robbery in Portland, an assault in Sacramento, a burglary in Phoenix." Sarah's hands tightened around her coffee mug. "In every case," Morrison continued, "he hurt people. But something interesting happened after your father's death. He disappeared for 5 years, then resurfaced in a rehabilitation program in Denver. He's been clean for 11 years, working as a janitor at a community center, helping kids stay off drugs. Morrison opened the folder and showed Sarah a photograph. It was Marcus, but not the Marcus she remembered from that terrible night. This Marcus was clean-shaven, wearing a volunteer t-shirt, surrounded by smiling children. "The accident that brought him to your hospital," Morrison said quietly. "He was driving back from a volunteer event, helping underprivileged kids learn to ride bikes safely. The rain, the dark road, it was just an accident." Sarah stared at the photograph, trying to reconcile this image with her memories of the desperate, violent man who had killed her father. "I'm not telling you this to excuse what he did," Morrison added. "Murder is murder, but I thought you should know that the man you saved has spent the last 11 years trying to become someone your father might have forgiven." After Morrison left, Sarah sat in her kitchen for hours, staring at the photograph he'd left behind. She thought about the operation, about the steady rhythm of Marcus's heartbeat on the monitors, about the way his face had looked so peaceful under anesthesia. She thought about her father, about the way he'd always seen the potential for goodness in everyone, even his most difficult patients. And she thought about the choice she'd made in that OR, not just to save a life, but to honor the memory of a man who had taught her that healing was always the right choice, no matter how much it hurt. The hospital review board met on a Tuesday morning. Sarah sat in a conference room facing 7 administrators, 3 lawyers, and 2 ethics consultants. The hospital's chief of surgery, Dr. Reynolds, led the proceedings. "Dr. Chen," he began, "your actions on the night in question have raised serious concerns about professional conduct, conflict of interest, and hospital liability." Sarah nodded. She had expected this. "However," Dr. Reynolds continued, "after extensive review of your case, examination of your surgical records, and consultation with ethics experts, this board has reached a unanimous decision." Sarah held her breath. "Your actions that night represent the highest ideals of medical practice. You faced an impossible situation and chose to honor your oath as a physician above all personal considerations. The board not only exonerates you of any wrongdoing, but commends you for your exemplary conduct under extraordinary circumstances." Sarah felt tears she hadn't known were coming slide down her cheeks. "Furthermore," Dr. Reynolds added, "the board would like to offer you the position of Chief of Emergency Surgery, effective immediately." But Sarah shook her head. "Thank you," she said, "but I need to do something else first." 3 months later, Marcus pled guilty to second-degree murder. At his sentencing hearing, he read a letter addressed to Dr. Sarah Chen. "I can't undo what I did 16 years ago. I can't bring back your father or erase the pain I caused your family, but I can tell you that lying on that operating table, knowing who you were and what you were risking to save me, changed something fundamental in who I am. Your father's legacy isn't just in the lives he saved during his career. It's in the daughter he raised, who chose compassion over revenge, healing over hatred. I will spend every day for the rest of my life trying to become worthy of the mercy you showed me. I'm sorry. I know those words aren't enough, but they're all I have." Dr. Sarah Chen never responded to the letter. She didn't need to. She had already said everything that needed to be said in that OR at 2:47 a.m. when she picked up a scalpel and chose to be the doctor her father raised her to be. The case made national headlines. Surgeon saves life of father's killer. But Sarah avoided all interviews, all publicity. She returned to work the next week, saving lives with the same quiet competence she'd always shown. Because in the end, that's what doctors do. They heal, they save. They choose hope over hatred, life over death, mercy over revenge. And sometimes, that choice changes everything. In our darkest moments, compassion still finds a way. Often in the quietest places, not everyone who heals wants recognition. Some just need to know that today, someone's life was saved, and sometimes that alone is enough to change the world. You may forget this story, but if no one retells it, courage stays silent forever. Subscribe to the Heroic Stories, where justice is honored, mercy is remembered, and no act of quiet heroism is ever lost.